Hello, and welcome to a Cloud Developer channel. This video is a continuation of our prior video where we installed and configured the jmeter application to perform load testing against our web application hosted in Service Fabric. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to reconfigure the jmeter application in order to perform what's called a distributed set of testing. And what that basically is it allows you to use other servers or virtual machines in your environment to be able to perform a higher and load test on your application server infrastructure. And that's due to primarily limitations into how many threads each server can actually generate against a particular server. So in the typical scenario, I believe that the maximum recommendation, depending on the specs of your server where you're generating a load from, they recommend roughly no more than 500 threads per machine. And in our case, what we want to try to do is actually set up a test so that we can completely load our 5-node Service Fabric cluster to make sure that we are getting the most of our cluster being used by hitting our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick walkthrough of how do you actually configure 3 additional servers on top of the one that we already have, where the jmeter application is actually the actual GUI is running from, which we're not going to use this to actually generate the load because that's not best practice, but we're going to configure those 3 other servers to actually generate that load. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'll show you is under the run option, you'll see that there's a menu for remote start. And as you can see right now, we have 127.0.0.1, which is a local loopback address. And what that means is that when we try to run the test, it will actually run the load generation from the same machine where this instance is running, which is something we want to change first. So I'll go ahead and actually close this instance, and I'll go to the bin folder. And inside of the bin folder, there's a file called jmeter.properties. So we'll go ahead and actually open this up. And in this file, there's a bunch of different properties available, but I've gone ahead and actually searched for a property called remote hosts, and it's available there by default. So what we'll do is we'll just comment that out, and we'll replace this with the names or IP addresses of the servers we want to leverage. So in this case, I have 2 machines, or 3 machines, VMs, and they're called JM1, JM2, JM3. And once I save it, I can go ahead and close this, and I can go ahead and restart the jmeter application. And what you'll notice is we'll have some additional options become available to us under the run menu option. So now under remote start, you'll see that those 3 machines are actually shown up. So let's do a quick verification to make sure that those servers are actually accessible. So we'll ping JM1. You can see it's responding. JM2, that's also responding, and JM3, and that's also responding. So we've set up our jmeter GUI in order to be able to control those servers. Now let's go ahead and actually install the jmeter application and the Java runtime. Now these machines that I'm actually using here are actually Windows 2016 server core editions. So you'll see them right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually configure the application to run on those servers. So actually, let me go ahead and add my account first to those machines so that I can actually remotely access them. I'll do that by using PowerShell. So, and the easiest way you could do that is by doing a command called invoke command. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to specify the actual script I want to run. So what I'm doing here is basically saying run the net local group and add my account to the local administrators. And I'm going to go ahead and pass in the credentials. And in this case, it's going to be the domain administrator account that I'm using here. Okay, and it completed. So now what we should be able to do is actually go ahead and navigate to that folder, or to the folder where we're going to store the software. And what I'll do is I'll create a folder called software, and we'll do a few things here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my downloads folder, and I'm going to want to put this JDK folder over there. So I'll go ahead and copy that over there. I'm also going to copy another folder, which is going to be the JMeter application itself, into that same folder. And also, in order to install the Java runtime, because this is Windows Server Core, you can't just simply double click or be able to just run the installer itself. You need to actually provide it some parameters. And one of those parameters actually is for how to actually run the installer. So let me open up a file that I have here that we're going to be using. Basically what this file does is it tells it to run a silent install, to disable the sponsor screen. It's not going to generate the start menu option. It's not going to reboot. It's going to automatically accept the EULA. And in this particular case, I don't have the auto update installed or configured. So in your environment, depending on how you keep up, Java up to date, essentially on your servers, you'll want to either turn this on to on, or enabled, or keep it off, and then you have a different process to actually keep it updated. And I'm not really sure what the static is set or how it's being used. So, but this is something that I found in an article, and I just kept it here. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it for the purpose of this demo. So I'll go ahead and close this, and we'll also copy this config file on that machine as well. The other thing that's important to note is we're going to be running the command to actually install Java using PowerShell. So this is the actual command that we're going to be executing here. Basically, once we remote into the server, we can execute cmd/c, which basically says go ahead and run everything inside of the quotes on that server, and it's going to say start/wait, which basically means that go ahead and wait for this installer to exit out. And it's going to give it the parameter of the installation of the configuration file itself, which is the one we just looked at. So this should be actually enough, and we can actually use the same invoke PowerShell command to run it simultaneously on all of those three servers. So before we do that, let's actually copy and paste that software folder on all of the other servers. So I'll copy it over to JM2 server, and let's put it on the JM3 server. While the copy command is running, I'm going to go ahead and actually bring up our PowerShell window and start crafting the command. So we're going to do invoke command. We'll specify the servers, which is going to be JM1, JM2, JM3. The script block is going to be that command that we wanted to run, which is that cmd command. And we're going to provide the credentials. So now that everything is there, hopefully this is actually going to work flawlessly, since it's the first time I'm executing it using this process. So far, no errors. One of the things that we can do real quick to validate to make sure everything is working is I'll bring up one of the VMs, and I'll log into it. Let's open up Task Manager, and under Details, we should be able to see, as you saw, that installer is actually running, and it should complete successfully. And as you can see, everything actually completed. So now we should be able to validate that everything worked correctly by basically going into that one server. So let's go to JM1 and run the Java version command. So you can see we have version 1.8.0_152, which means that we actually installed our application correctly. So let's go ahead and exit out of that session. So everything should be up and running the way we need it to. Now we're still going to need to actually run this console here just for the purpose of this demo. And the reason for that is because we want to actually go ahead and start that application, the jmeter application. And you do that by going into the jmeter folder. And we'll go into the bin folder. And we'll find all of the batch files. Now, in order to actually run it in a non-GUI mode, which is the mode that you want it to actually run your load generators in, you want to actually start it up with jmeter-server command. So let's go ahead and run that. So the reason why I actually wasn't running the first time is because when it was actually still installing, I opened up the console, and the installer was actually still trying to set all the environment variables and everything it needed. So I needed to actually log off and reload the profile in order for it to work correctly. So as you can see that the application actually started, and it found the jmeter core jar, and as you can see, it actually started listening on this particular IP address and this particular port. So let's actually go ahead and run our test manager on this machine. Let's see, everything seems to be working correctly. So let's go ahead and open it up on the 3 other machines here. Log in. It started here as well, and then we'll run it on our last VM. And as you can see, it started here as well. So what we should be able to do now is actually go ahead and open up the console to the first one as we watch us trying to actually start up the jmeter test that we've set up against jmeter 1 itself. So we should be able to actually see a message come through. So let's go ahead and click this. And as you can see that it actually started the test and finished the test. It was pretty quick, and that's because simply the way we have our test set up. Now, let's say we want to actually run this for, let's say, 100 executions. Let's actually go ahead and run this again. And let's take a look at the results. So you can see that it's going pretty quick, and it's completing all of the requests very fast. Everything seems to be working correctly, and we can also verify that it's working against the other servers as well by trying to execute the same test against JM2. And you can see that the test started and test finished, and then on JM3 we should be able to see the same results. And it started and it finished. Now if we wanted to actually run this across all servers, so you just simply need to go to remote start all. And then once you run this, it actually generates the load across all servers. Now the one thing to keep in mind, because of the way this is actually set up, you're not actually executing just simply 100 tests. You're actually executing 100 times 3. Because you're actually generating or issuing and executing the same load test on 3 servers at the same time. So it's not like it's distributing the load between the servers that are available. It's actually issuing the same exact test across all of your servers that are generating the load. So in the next video, what I'm going to show you is a slightly more detailed plan of how you can actually execute a login operation, keep your cookie recorded, and actually use it in your subsequent test to make sure that you're simulating an actual user behavior. And then we're going to actually use a different thread group that is going to allow us to actually control how we start the load test and how we actually complete the load test, and how many users are actually going to be executing it. And basically, it's a different way of being able to execute your test and control the load on your server. So I'll go ahead and actually stop this video here. If you have any questions, please go ahead and leave your comments in the comment section below, and I will talk to you in the next video.